Blair, that is exactly right. Now, here is the plan. Georgia State University saying that it plans to relocate this Olympic Cauldron just behind me that sits on top of the Olympic Flame Tower on Hank Aaron Drive. And they plan to move it to Centennial Olympic Park. Just hours ago, protesters filled the intersection out there saying that stripping the tower of its cauldron is splitting up a piece of history.
If you rip the head off the Statue of Liberty, what you got left? And we feel the same way here. If you take the flame away, the cauldron away from the structure, what's the significance? It's desecrating the structure.
Plans to move the Olympic Cauldron in Atlanta's Summerhill neighborhood are igniting a controversy. In 1996, Muhammad Ali used the Olympic torch to light the fuse that lit up the Olympic Cauldron, signaling the start of the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta. 30 years later, dozens of Summerhill residents argue it should stay here.
A promise made to this community is a promise that should be kept.
Columbus Ward was here when the tower was erected.
Back in the days, we had a group called Atlanta Neighborhood United for Fairness, which really forced the Olympic Committee to work with these neighborhoods in Atlanta, in particular People Sound, Summerhill, and Mechanicsville.
Advocating then to ensure neighborhoods were part of Olympic history, and 30 years later advocating now to keep that history here. Georgia State University says it plans to refurbish and move the cauldron, but not the whole tower or bridge it's connected to Centennial Olympic Park. In a statement, Georgia State University says the initiative to move the cauldron, quote, honors both the history of the games and the remarkable transformation of Summerhill, the neighborhood that hosted Olympic Stadium and continues to serve as a gateway to downtown Atlanta. But protesters ask, why not refurbish it right where it is?
And if money's been raised to move it and renovate it, might we be able to partner with that organization to do the same thing here in Summerhill?
Georgia State says it also plans to enhance the Olympic Flame Tower after the cauldron is relocated. Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens signing a resolution in support of keeping the cauldron in Summerhill.
We passed a resolution for immediate consideration, just asking that we put a pause to this.
One more look tonight at the Olympic Cauldron as we tell you the president of the Organized Neighbors of Summerhill tells us that there is a meeting scheduled with decision makers for after the 4th of July to talk more about this plan to move the cauldron. Now, as it comes to Georgia State, there's no timeline yet for when this cauldron will be relocated. Our newsroom did reach out to Georgia State University to ask whether there have been any changes to their plans to move the cauldron. No response as of tonight. That's the very latest from here in Summerhill. I'm Sydney Stallworth, Atlanta News First.